The man on the table is named Marcus Reyes, and he has 17 entry wounds and 11 minutes before his blood pressure drops below the point where your skill becomes irrelevant. You have been flown in blindfolded. You do not know what state you are in. You open your bag and you begin. It is a Tuesday. This is your Tuesday now. You did not choose this the way people choose careers. You chose medicine. Medicine chose the rest. The residency ends in 2003. Johns Hopkins. 7 years of formation built on a single premise: that human life carries uniform value, and your function is to preserve it without hierarchy. You believe this completely when you graduate. You believe it for approximately 4 more years working emergency medicine in a public hospital in Baltimore, whose violent statistics you know by memory because they arrive in your bay every weekend between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. in the form of young men with names and mothers. You learn things there that no program teaches. You learn to work in conditions that are not ideal. You learn that the human body does not negotiate with the politics of who damaged it. You learn that your hands do not discriminate between the person who caused harm and the person who received it. You file this as data without knowing yet what file it belongs to. The call comes through a contact named Dr. Stephen Caldwell, not a friend. A colleague from Johns Hopkins who graduated 2 years ahead of you made a different set of calculations early and has been making them quietly ever since. You have not spoken in 3 years. He calls on a Wednesday afternoon. His voice is careful in a way that communicates more than his words do. The offer is not presented as what it is. It is presented as private practice, high net worth clients, full discretion required, compensation at a level that your current salary cannot approach in a decade of clean work. You are 34 years old. You carry $190,000 in student debt and a skill set that is genuinely rare. You make the calculation the way you make every clinical decision, with the information available and the time you have. You say yes. The first patient is a man named Daniel Ortega. He is 53. He has 3 bullet fragments that no conventional surgeon can remove without generating a paper trail that reaches a federal database within 48 hours. He is calm. He speaks in measured sentences and watches you the way someone watches a mechanic working on an engine they cannot afford to lose. He is not interested in your credentials. He is not interested in your conscience. He is interested in whether your hands work. They work. You remove the fragments in 4 hours in a facility built inside a warehouse outside a city you piece together from ambient sound and temperature, but never confirm. The equipment is better than anything in the Baltimore hospital. The anesthesiologist is a man named Frank Dillon, who made the same calculation 5 years before you and arrived at the same address through a different door. You do not discuss the circumstances. There is an etiquette to this work that establishes itself without anyone stating the rules. The rule is this: you do the work. You do not ask about the work. What the work actually looks like is not what you expected and not what any version of cinema prepared you for. It is not dramatic in the theatrical sense. It is precise. You are called for gunshot wounds, but also for cardiac events that cannot enter a hospital record, for infections that went untreated too long because the patient could not risk appearing in any medical system anywhere, for chronic conditions requiring ongoing management across months and years in men who cannot exist on paper. You manage a slow-moving kidney condition for a man named Robert Salinas across 5 years of quarterly visits in 3 different states. You deliver the healthy son of a man named Victor Cruz inside a compound in the Texas desert with 2 armed guards outside the door, and the mother asking you in perfect English whether you went to a good school. You tell her Johns Hopkins. She seems satisfied. You do the delivery. Everyone survives. The blindfold protocol on transport is not a threat. It is a business arrangement that protects both parties. You understand this distinction early and clearly. It keeps you functional and it keeps you alive, which in this work are the same thing. The compensation arrives in structures that require their own management. You learn things about financial architecture that were never in any curriculum. An attorney named James Harlow handles the infrastructure. He has managed affairs of this nature for longer than you have been practicing medicine. You pay him at a level that ensures continued commitment. He earns it without question and without requiring explanation, because explanation would require him to know more than his function demands. What this costs is not what you expected to be the hardest payment. You expected fear. Fear is present, but it has a clinical quality during active work. When your hands are inside a body, the identity of the body is not the primary variable. The primary variable is the repair. Fear lives in the transit hours. It lives in the waiting. During the procedure itself, it becomes information, processed and managed like any other variable in the room. What costs more than the fear is the weight of the silence required to carry it. You cannot discuss this work with anyone who is not already inside it. Your sister believes you have a private concierge practice serving tech executives and finance people who value discretion. Your mother is proud in a way that would break into something else entirely if she understood the full picture. You do not explain the full picture. The explanation would transfer a weight they did not consent to carry. You carry it without ceremony, without naming it to anyone, including yourself. You are at a dinner party in Chicago in 2011. Someone across the table asks what you do. You say private medicine, high net worth clients with complex ongoing needs requiring complete discretion. They nod. The conversation shifts to real estate. You eat your food. You were in a converted facility in Nevada 40 hours ago, removing a .45 caliber round from a man named Eddie Montoya, who runs a distribution infrastructure spanning 4 states and who gripped your arm before you put him under and told you that his children needed him to come back. You told him you understood. You put him under. You brought him back. He was not the first man who gripped your arm like that. He was not the last. This is the second rule. One nobody states, but one you learn through observation in the first 6 months. These men operate in an environment where uncertainty has historically resolved in the direction of violence. You learn to speak differently inside it. You state only what you can verify. When you cannot verify, you say what steps you are taking to reach certainty and by when. This builds a trust that is not warm in any conventional sense, but is absolute in the only sense that matters in this world. Absolute trust is the only currency that reliably purchases continued survival. You hold it carefully. You do not spend it on comfort. You develop a philosophy the way any practitioner develops one, slowly, through the accumulated weight of specific decisions made in rooms with no peer review and no record. The philosophy is this: your function is clinical. Your hands repair. What a repaired person does after you have repaired him is not entered in your ledger. You did not manufacture the conditions that require your skill set. The conditions exist independently. You operate within them the way a trauma surgeon operates in a war zone without ownership of the war. A doctor who closes a wound does not own what caused the wound. You are that doctor. You hold this position with both hands. You hold it cleanly for 6 years. Then it becomes harder to hold without maintenance. Not because of anything witnessed directly, because of what the aggregate calculates. The patients you treat, the wounds you close, the bodies you return to operational capacity. You understand at a clinical level what operational capacity means in this specific context. You begin to understand it specifically rather than abstractly. The numbers acquire faces. The faces attach to downstream consequences you cannot measure, but can no longer prevent yourself from tracking. You do not locate an exit. The exit is not a geometry you can solve unilaterally. This is not a threat anyone delivers. It is a structural fact you understood partially when you entered and understand completely by year 4. You are inside a building. Buildings of this specific nature do not have marked exits available to individual occupants. You are in the building. What you do instead is become indispensable at a larger scale. You build a small team. 2 additional physicians, a trauma nurse named Andrea Walsh, who arrived at this work through a different calculation made during a different crisis in a different city, and who is the most capable clinical operator you have ever worked beside. You manage them the way you were managed, with information, with compensation, with absolute clarity about what the rules are and what they protect. You are useful. That is the only protection that holds at this level. Not loyalty, not history, not the relationships you have built across 12 years in facilities in Nevada, Texas, Arizona, and 3 locations you have never been able to place on any map. Usefulness. You remain the most capable person available for the specific problem that requires solving. That is the position. You hold it. It is a Tuesday in 2015. You are in the back of a black SUV moving through Phoenix. Your bag is packed and checked. Your hands are steady. A man whose name you will not know until you are already working on him needs you in 22 minutes. You run the 3 most probable presentations in sequence. You map your responses to each. You identify what you do not know and prepare for it. Tonight, in a teaching hospital somewhere that still believes the world operates by the rules posted on its walls, there is a resident finishing a 30-hour shift. They are exhausted and excellent. They are learning this work inside the system designed to teach it, with oversight, with records, with the assumption that the institution holding them will continue to hold. They are learning a version of this. You are doing the only version that exists in rooms they will never enter, under conditions no program can simulate, with a margin for error that has never once been anything other than 0. The car stops. You pick up your bag. You do not hesitate. You have not hesitated in 12 years. You walk in.